Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bryon Wilfert, Member of Parliament for Richmond Hill. I'm pleased to be able to speak to you today through a regular program that I will have on Pasargadtv. This is very important for me as a way to connect to you about issues that are important to the community and to Canadians in general. I'd like to talk to you today about the economy. As a former parliamentary secretary to two ministers of finance, I know how difficult it is to deal with economic issues. In 1993, when the Liberals came into power, we inherited a $42.5 billion deficit. We had to work with Canadians to eliminate the deficit. And in fact, we became the first G8 state to eliminate the national deficit and to start paying down the debt. Over $60 billion was paid on the national debt. A debt is simply the accumulation of many deficits over the years. We cannot spend more money than we take in. Government is about choices. When the Conservatives came in 2006, they decided to take eventually 2% off the GST. Now that may be very attractive if you're buying a high-end sports car or a yacht. But I can tell you that the average Canadian is not seeing the 2-cent saving unless, even if you go to Tim Hortons, you're not going to save very much money. So the point is, what is the effect of 2%? Well, I can tell you that for every percent that is taken off, it costs the National Treasury between $5 and $6 billion. So you're looking at about $10 to $12 billion each year, which has to be found in order to keep the 2% off the GST. When we were in power, we brought in a 5-year, $100 billion tax cut, personal income tax cut. Government is about choices. If one wants to reduce the GST, that's fine, except you have to find the money for other programs, such as social programs, continue dealing with the deficit, etc. We warned last year, before the last election, that in fact the economy was starting to tank. And to make sure we had those safety valves, we had a $3 billion contingency fund in place, which was eliminated by the Conservatives. What does that mean? That means that if there was a SARS or some outbreak, H1N1, for example, we would have money set aside in order to respond to that particular crisis. Unfortunately, there is no $3 billion contingency fund. And what has happened since then? The economy has shrunk. We are now into at least a $60 billion deficit, which again, we will have to get out of at some point, and how are we going to do that is a very difficult question. We see massive unemployment, up to 10% in the province of Ontario. We see Canadians who cannot apply for EI, for employment insurance, and because they are short some hours. We believe very strongly that employment insurance needs to be expanded so that Canadians not only can have access to employment insurance, but also the retooling, the job training that needs to be done in order to put Canadians back into the workforce. Again, we're not surprised though. Mr. Flaherty left Ontario with a $5.6 billion deficit when he left office. And now we have this situation with a $60 billion deficit. Now we have infrastructure programs. I've been a strong advocate for stimulating the economy through infrastructure programs. That is where a municipality such as Richmond Hill would have shovel-ready projects. These are projects which they would like to start immediately, but don't have the necessary funding. So in partnership with the federal government and the province of Ontario, they're able to move forward. Now in June, announced 6 projects in Richmond Hill. 3 were roads, 1 was a recycling program, and another to deal with an arena. Now what was important about that is that that money was matched by the municipality and by the province of Ontario. But unfortunately, the Conservatives believe that it's their money. And of course, they don't invite you to these things because being a Liberal member of Parliament, they don't invite you, even though you champion this and continue to push for this, as I did with some Parks Recreation facility upgrades, as I did with the Richmond Hill Co-op. And again, all these are important. So in the last month and a half, Richmond Hill has received over $7 million, I should say, that's come in into the community, matched by the provincial and federal government, which is very important. But again, it's putting people back to work. It's dealing with necessary infrastructure. But again, where is the long-term plan? Where is the plan to deal with the chronic unemployed at the present time? Where is the deal to deal with it with inflation? In fact, the parliamentary officer, the budget officer for Parliament, who's independent, says that Mr. Flaherty's numbers are completely erroneous. And so we're not even sure what the deficit is. But we are sure is that it's your mortgage, it's your job, it's your pension that we are worried about, and we want to make sure that in fact they're there for you in the long term. And therefore we have proposed a number of changes, both to EI, both in terms of getting back, in terms of starting to pay down, dealing with deficit as soon as we can, but also to ensure that there is the innovation agenda, that when young people are coming out of university, that we are on the cutting edge. We need to, for example, in the case of Nortel, the government has not intervened and allowed Canadian technology, much of it paid by Canadian taxpayers, to go to Ericsson, which is a Swedish firm. That means that transfer of technology has gone to a foreign buyer. And that means that the money that we have invested as Canadians is lost. Now, there was an opportunity for Research in Motion, for RIM, the makers of the BlackBerry. They wanted to, in fact, be able to bid on that, but they were blocked. Now, the government had an opportunity to say, no, we're not going to let this go forward, but in fact they have. And so from our perspective, that is a great tragedy. It's a loss for Canadians. So again, when we are talking about the economy, we're talking about employment insurance, we're talking about innovation, we're talking about how do we deal with the deficit, but most importantly, we're talking about you. We're talking about your jobs, about your mortgage, about your pensions, and about your investment. And so we need to continue to work collaboratively with all orders of government, but importantly with Canadians, to ensure that Canada becomes, again, the envy of the world, where we were the only G7 state to pay off the deficit and the only G state to start paying down the national debt. Again, I thank you for your attention and look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you.